Just like they tried to suppress the resurgence of the mystery schools that were being taught at Alexandria, the new Roman-sanctioned state religion of official Christianity, or Constantinianity as I call it, began the suppression of the early true Christians, the Gnostics. The philosophies upon which esoteric Christianity is based predates the 1st century AD accounts of Jesus by thousands of years. Gnosticism, which comes from the Greek word gnostikos, meaning possessing knowledge, and that in turn is derived from the Greek noun gnosis, which means knowledge, was a 1st and 2nd century religious system whose adherents wrote and practiced a pre-Christian form of the philosophy that Jesus studied and taught. Naturally, such esoteric knowledge had to be purged from early exoteric Christianity by dark occultists and the early church in order to ensure that the potentially transformative power of Gnosticism did not gain a foothold in the Roman Empire and threaten the power of the entrenched ruling class. The Nag Hammadi scriptures and other Gnostic texts, such as the Pistis Sophia or Faith Wisdom, contained ideas that the rulers of that time certainly did not want spreading far and wide. These teachings included an awareness of the unseen world, or the occult, which encompassed the existence of cosmic moral law, which governs the consequences of free will-based behavior. The Gnostics were teaching and understood natural law at their core of their philosophy. Exposing the rulership of what the Gnostics called the archons, the masters, the ruling class of the earth. Some people would say that they were non-human entities, the archons, either subtle, hyperdimensional or extra-dimensional beings, or even extraterrestrial beings. Regardless of what their nature was, their plan is the same: to control, to dominate, to manipulate, and to enslave. That's why I like to call anarchy anarchony. You know, the word anarchy comes from an-archon, the absence of masters or a ruling class. It doesn't mean chaos, as we'll get to. Rejection of all archonic false authority in favor of the true authority of the universal creator's moral law. This is what the Gnostics practiced and preached and accepted. They knew there was no legitimate authority in man. No such thing. The only authority is the law of the creator. The concept that true spirituality was ultimately about waking up from worldly illusion created by incorrect, irrational, and immoral thinking. They coined the concept, waking up from illusion. We still use this term today in spiritual movements. Karmic consequence accrued over multiple lifetimes, which was completely wiped out from the canonical scriptures in the Council of Nicaea. The existence of 3 distinct types of human soul groups. This may be one of the most interesting Gnostic philosophies, because it may explain why we have such a difficulty in waking people up to truth. They considered these 3 different soul groups to be different classifications of spirituality within human beings. The first group were known as the Hylics. Hylics, Hylics. And they were this was the class of human beings that was completely identified with materialism and base instincts. They only identified with the physical body and the material world. They were spiritually unconscious, and they would be extremely difficult or impossible to awaken because they were so rooted in the ego and so rooted in the flesh. They never even considered spiritual matters. They never turned their mind to it at all. So that's the Hylics. Then they had a group of human beings that they classified as the psychics. The people who had some form of spiritual consciousness. They were somewhat embedded in mind. They could conceive, they could have conceptual thought processes. but they only really grasped spirituality from a simplified emotional perspective, rather than from a place of true, deeply rooted knowledge, or in other words, occultism. And the Gnostics considered that the psychics were possible to wake up, but with some effort. You had to put a lot of effort. They were fence sitters, in other words. You could bring the knowledge to them and they would listen, at least with an open mind, maybe consider it, and maybe they'd move a little bit in consciousness in a lifetime. And maybe you could wake some of them up fully. And then some of them, they didn't wake up and they went back into the illusion. And then the third group was known as the pneumatics. I love the name. And, it comes from the Greek word pneuma, meaning spirit. And these were those who were spiritually awakened. They were, the high consciousness soul group. They were elects or adepts who incarnate to become teachers of spiritual knowledge. The pneumatics. And, how many people have ever heard this? Ever. 1, 2, 3. 3 in the room. Okay? So even people who, study this type of esoteric information and spirituality, it's buried. They don't want people understanding this. The early church didn't want people understanding this. Certainly the ruling class doesn't want them understanding it.